Last week, I choreographed a dance and mentioned the several dance styles that I featured: tutting, bone breaking, whacking, finger tutting, as part of a robot piece. But I conveniently forgot the two styles that are actually most featured: foot tutting and animation. Foot tutting, as you might imagine, is tutting with your feet, which is something I've already done once before in an Egypt piece. I actually like the dynamicism of using your whole body to tut. So hands are obvious, feet and fingers. But I've recently discovered that there's a style of dance called animation that is actually quite similar in presentation to robot. Animation, as you may imagine, is like watching the old school pad animation drawings where you drew pictures on a pad of paper with slight different movement variations and then flipped them very quickly. And that's how olden day animation was accomplished before the computer. Even if you flip very quickly and deftly, that movement through the pad of paper has some jitter. And that jitter is exactly what we capture in animation style. More jitter is robot. That's how I distinguish the two. But to be completely fair, a lot of the time when you watch all of these styles, they actually blend together seamlessly. I denote them in my mind because that's how I'm learning to dance. I search specific styles up when I feel like it, and for some reason I have a good intuition roughly what that style is, and even roughly what steps are. That's exactly how I've actually done it. I'll watch tons and tons of dance. I've mentioned a couple of shows before: America's Best Dance Crew, World of Dance. And some specific move will attract me. Now, just by looking at the move and watching the move, you'd hardly think I'd be able to just search on YouTube, but it's worked out largely well because I have some sort of intuition. I've watched enough dance before that I've heard terms, and then I just match terms up to what I see later on. The bass b-boy step that I've learned the last couple of months is the crossover step, and I think that one's actually self-explanatory because when you watch and observe it, you're indeed crossing over. Over the last 6-7 months, I've actually learned many variations of that crossover step, or Indian crossover step, and choreographed my own breakdancing top rock routines. I mentioned last time that I'm building my upper body strength for all of the dynamic breakdancing moves that you'd observe in a world champion level Red Bull battle. But obviously that takes some time. I already started with an advantage because I'd been working on upper body strength for many years through yoga and full military style push-ups. But even with some built-up upper body strength, breakdancing requires specific body strength and specific flexibility and body strength. So it's been actually quite a hard regimen that I've been following. I usually do more top rock dancing and other types of dancing because that upper body strength style of breakdancing is actually hard for me to get into. I need a lot of setup. So I tend to just practice other things, but through 6-7 months of dancing, I've actually thrown down. You watch me do footwork, floor work, freezes. I'm just slow. I'm building up here. That's the thing. So the reason why documenting this progress has been extremely helpful to me is that I have a living, breathing piece of continuous evidence to remind myself of my growth during this fucking pandemic. And that's what's kept me sane and happy. Some people have asked me what I think about the prospects of being away from adventure traveling for up to a couple years if this pandemic draws out. That's really hard for me to answer because I think there's a certain point where I'll be back on the road, regardless of what the world looks like. But I'm yet to be at that point. When will I be at that point? That's an ongoing discussion with me. What I am certain of is I ain't putting money down without a full refund policy in place. Earlier in the year, I tested out some of these policies and they've largely worked. Aeroplan had a 50% off miles for anywhere in Canada, and I mentioned that I structured coast to coast because of the free stopover and layover rules. So it was the Arctic to witness and experience the Northern Lights, and then Atlantic Canada as a tack on. But that theoretical trip has come and gone. September. Aeroplan has actually since extended their full refund period, but many restrictions still exist, even if we're allowed to travel. So at least last I checked, before that theoretical trip, if I had gone on it, I would have had to quarantine for a total of 45 days, I think. Into the Arctic, into the Atlantic, and then back. Now, I mean, that's a lot of money out of pocket to be quarantining. So that's the obvious thing. It just costs too much, especially if you have to pay out of pocket for those accommodations. Now, I've since researched some other schemes where you can have free accommodation, and that might be something that I research into further. We'll have to figure out what to do. I know, This is a tough one. Should I mention it? Okay. Colin O'Brady is an athlete with a couple of jaw-dropping world records, and he's often mentioned a type of meditation that's absolutely free. That's actually something that one could weave into potential getaway for oneself, because I've researched it and it is actually free. They are mostly, at least in BC, outside of the main city centers, so traveling there is a pain in the ass. But that's a possible solution. My guess would be some travelers are thinking of traveling locally before they travel internationally, and that's the smarter thing to do. The government of Canada still has its outward travel ban. When I call it a ban, it's a soft ban. Obviously, no country can keep you in here, but you just have to be aware that travel insurance and the government both are likely null and void. They've already warned, and they've always warned that if you travel against their advice, that you have to rely solely on yourself. No travel insurance, no consular assistance. To be completely honest, I've always actually traveled under this mindset anyways, because from what I understand, consular assistance is actually very slow even if you qualify for it. So the easiest thing to do always is to solve your own problems as much as possible, unless of course you're completely incapacitated, and that'll be that. That's something that can happen throughout life in general, so you'll just have to deal with that when it comes. I've been lucky enough to have, I think, a safe, healthy adventure travel career despite the risks that I take. So I'm taking part of this pandemic time to really appreciate that, because I'm going to be reimagining how I backpack in the future. And that's an important reprieve for me to take in reviewing many of my past decisions. I think those gotta go. For example, I often speak of me and my adventurous sleeping in Europe to pay for gorilla trekking in Africa. I actually talk about this more than I talk about those wild African gorillas themselves. Them, chimpanzees and bonobos are actually our closest DNA species, fellow primates, great apes, and they actually do feel human to me. On my YouTube, you can check a video of me having a playful fight with a baby gorilla over one of my bags. Naughty me, I actually purposely kept that bag loosely hanging because I knew it might attract some attention from a playful, mischievous gorilla, and it did. So that gorilla was really strong. It was a baby, but it actually almost tugged my bag away from me. And the interesting thing was, after that encounter, it actually sulked. It was sulky like a toddler would be. So there, I'm concentrating more on the gorillas this time. But in order to afford that, I actually was homeless in Europe. I slept on park benches. I slept while standing up in a telephone booth. I slept in museums and castles without guards. So I had to do what I had to do. But obviously, in the post-pandemic world, things might be different, so I'll have to reimagine everything. But that's also something that I guess I look forward to because it's a way to be creative. How do we accomplish our goals with changing constraints in a changing world? What else? What else? I realized last week that I've been shortchanging myself because I have had a structured goal system for my dancing as well. Every 2 weeks, I choreograph something new, alternating between breakdancing routines and pop routines. So I think that's actually been working well for me. Of course, that's nested within the greater goal of becoming the best dancer that I can possibly become, but there's still functional, actionable goals that I have adhered to for the entire 6 or 7 months. So sometimes when I'm down on myself about this pandemic, I've had people around me remind me that I'm actually very dedicated to the things I've dedicated myself to. And that level of dedication is hard for many people. So I'm leaning into that in days where I've less of an optimistic outlook or realistic outlook. Is that what I'm gonna call it at for talking? Okay, I feel like dancing now.